Welcome to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show, where faith and liberty meet. Our host is Dave Garrison from Ohio Christian University, a longtime Fortune 100 company top executive and a former U.S. Congressional Candidate from Texas. Our goal for the Faith and Liberty Talk Show is to give you an opportunity to listen to interviews and discussions with significant authorities and experts on subjects related to Christians engaging in the civil and political arena. The mission of the show is to give you real information and not sound bites that you can really use. We have a website for the show, faithandliberty.org. At this website, you can obtain more information about the show, our guests, subscribe to our newsletter, and become a friend of the show, and like us on our Faith and Liberty Facebook page. You can also access all of our previous shows. Please keep in mind that the Faith and Liberty Talk Show exists only with the generosity and support of our listeners. If our show is of value to you, we would appreciate you visiting our website, faithandliberty.org, and donating to the show. Now, let's begin today's show. Thank you for joining us.
Once again, we have a wonderful guest with us, Rebecca Hagelin, and she has been a champion of the pro-family message, both in Washington and around the nation for some 25 years. I'm sure many of our listeners have seen her on Fox and CNN and CBN and all hosts of other places. Currently, she is the president and CEO of Rebecca Hagelin Communications and Marketing. You also have a weekly column in the Washington Times. You're writing for Town Hall and all sorts of people, aren't you, Rebecca?
Yes, I'm really blessed to have a format with the Washington Times newspaper every Monday, and then that column also appears other places. And then at the end of each week, I turn it into a free newsletter for people who don't have access to those media sources.
And we'll get that link from you, and we'll post it on our website for people to access.
Oh, great.
Now, one of the main reasons I wanted to get you on the show was because of your, I guess this is your last book, 30 Ways in 30 Days to Save Your Family.
That's correct.
And prior to that, you had written a book that I have always thought was one of the best titles ever, Home Invasion, Protecting Your Family in a Culture That's Gone Stark Raving Mad. That is a great title. I don't know who came up with it, but that's great.
Thank you. That was a combination of my husband and my thinking about a book title. So my husband had a lot to do with that because he knows my heart, and so he was instrumental in that particular title.
Okay, fantastic. Some of us know of you from when you were the Vice President Communications and Marketing Director at Heritage Foundation, and the communications and knowledge of Heritage really blossomed while you were there, and I'm sure you're a big part of that.
Well, I appreciate that. I had a very, very good team, and the founder and the then president of Heritage Foundation gave me really a lot of latitude to try new technologies and new ways to reach people with our message, which was based on conservative principles and I believe biblical principles as well.
Absolutely. Something I'm sure you're proud of. You've received a couple of awards, and I wanted to mention at the beginning of the show because I know a lot of our listeners will be as impressed as I was when I learned of it. In 2006, Concerned Women for America named you as one of the top 10 evangelical women in the country, and then the Claire Luce Policy Institute named you as a great American conservative woman, one of the 12 great American conservative women. And that kind of recognition, I think, is not only well-deserved, but shows your heart, as you mentioned earlier.
I was just going to say I was humbled by both of those. I don't really think I'm deserving, but hopefully it's a reflection of the importance they put on the subject matter and work I talk about rather than on me.
Yeah, I think that's part of the humility that comes with being a believer, and I think that's the way God intends it. But when we get those awards, we thank Him for it. Now, you and your husband, Andy, have 3 children. They're all about college age or something now, right?
Well, as of December, they are all college graduates.
Oh, my gosh.
Our youngest child, Kristen, graduated in December just recently here. And so we are not only empty nesters, but we also don't have any more college bills. Yay!
Yeah, I sure know that. Now, before we get into some of the discussion on the 30 ways and the culture, I wanted to explain to the listeners, because they're pretty used to hearing a lot of political people come on, and I wanted to make it clear why I've asked you to come on the show and why you've agreed to do it. In my opinion, and probably the opinion of a lot of other people, not probably, I know it's the opinion of others, that you and your views are especially pertinent to today, first of all. They're very common sense for families. You point out a lot of things that I think a lot of parents miss. You know, you're not only an expert in the culture, which people can see in your book, Protecting Your Family in a Culture That's Gone Stark Raving Mad. I guess the beginning of it is home invasion. And the family in the book that we've already mentioned. And listeners, I've read the entire book, and you have to go out there and buy it. It's called 30 Ways in 30 Days to Save Your Family. Now, again, listeners, the reason I have asked Rebecca on the show is the family is so important, because many of you remember the quote from Ronald Reagan, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same." And I think you capture a lot of that, Rebecca. Now, before the show, you and I talked, and I mentioned that my wife and I have 4 children, grown children, all of them a little older than yours, and we have 17 grandchildren. And I can tell you from our experience and that of many of the parents we've known, our experience agrees with your views on the family. And I think your book is one of the most balanced and wisest that I've seen. Too often I've seen these books and they get real legalistic when you're talking about the family, or they're just a bunch of cliches. You just have guideline after guideline, list after list, and you make some really valid points. So I just wanted to get that all out to the listeners, because I think everything that you're going to hear from Rebecca today goes to our religious freedom and to the freedom of America. So, Rebecca, let me ask it to you this way. What are some of the reasons you believe that the culture has gone stark raving mad?
Well, I think you just have to look around and you can see the sad evidence. Let me give you one statistic. In 1950, for every 100 babies that were born in America, 12 were born to a family that would either soon suffer a divorce or they were born out of wedlock. 12 out of every 100. Fast forward to today, and you see a real tragic figure. For every 100 babies that are born in America, about 60 are born into brokenness. That is not a trajectory America will survive on if that rate continues. So you look at what sociologists and social scientists, Pat Fagan calls, we live in a culture of brokenness and a culture of rejection. And then let's look at the abortion statistics. 55 million babies have been aborted since Roe v. Wade. That means the young generation, those in their 20s, 1/3 of that generation was aborted. 1/3. We've got some real problems in America that go to the core of what really causes a society to fall apart. And if you look throughout history, you see that the family is the DNA of every single civil society. It's the basic foundational block of every civil society since the beginning of time. And when you start destroying the family unit, the civil society eventually falls apart too. So we can't continue along these trajectories of our family being redefined and fallen apart, of living in a society where radical ideology has pitted mothers against their preborn babies, is causing wars between women and men, is causing the family to be redefined to mean something other than what God instituted for stability for not just people and individuals, but as a nation.
What do you think are Rebecca, what do you think are the most pressing issues right now with the culture that you wake up in the morning and your heart goes out to it?
Well, every day, I think about the destruction of the family unit and the bonds between husband and wife, between wife and husband, between father, mother, and children. Every day I think about what the destruction of those bonds mean to not just individuals, but to our stability as a nation.
Oh, I agree.
And, you know, when you look back at the beginning of mankind in the garden, you know, what was Satan's first line of attack was to create and destroy, obviously, the bonds between man and God, but also to get in between and cause friction between the husband and wife. You know, his mode has always been to attack relationships and the right order of relationships. And I see in America, when I wake up every day, the result of those relationships being destroyed and redefined. And what you have are a generation of children who were raised in brokenness, who don't understand what loyalty and fidelity means because they haven't even seen loyalty between their mom and dad. You have generations of children who, when they start thinking about what abortion means, that a woman has rejected her own child, doesn't understand what God designed the relationship of a mother to her children to be. Obviously, you have marriage being redefined to be something other than a man and a woman bound together until death do they part. And so what results from that is confusion. It's confusion of identity. It's not understanding what loyalty and fidelity and commitment and a sense of belonging are. And, of course, it affects every aspect of our society.
Well, I agree, and particularly, of course, I'm quite a bit older than you, but when somebody says to me family, I think of mom and dad and kids and a white, nice house with a picket fence around it. And that definition of family is long gone. But let's get into some of the causes of what's going on here. And you being kind of a media expert, communications expert, I want to jump right into those. So that, you know, any discussion in the culture and the family always does turn to media. You state in your book that 80% of the mothers are concerned about the influence of media in America. What is this influence that mothers are worrying about, and rightfully so?
Well, yes, and there's two issues to discuss with that question. The first is the issue that they're concerned about. And let me just give you, again, you know, just a few facts and figures so that the audience understands what we're talking about.
Oh, I love facts and figures, Rebecca. I love numbers.
Good.
Go for it.
Well, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation, who does every 5 years, they do an in-depth study on media usage by children.
Yep.
So their latest study was done in the year 2010, and they found that youth ages 8 to 18 years old devote an average of 7 hours and 38 minutes every day to using entertainment media. Okay, and because they multitask, you know, our older listeners may not understand what media multitasking is, but that means they might be using their iPod and watching television at the same time. They're actually managing to spend almost 11 hours, 10 hours and 45 minutes of media content a day.
Wow. And
yes, if you were to extrapolate the overlap and put that out in hours, it would be almost 11 hours a day. And that's entertainment media. Okay, that's iPods and iPads and cell phones and television and the internet and video gaming and all of that.
Instagram.
That's not using it for school.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you have to say to yourself, okay, what are they consuming? What is it that they're consuming that they're spending that many hours of if not all their attention, then part of their attention on per day? And all you have to look at is just, to get an example, you know, just flip on any television station and you'll see the messages overwhelming are anti-family, they're anti-God, they are infested and infected with anything other than selfless and loving messages. You know, listen to the music, listen and see the violence in the video, many of the video games. So messages that they are consuming are negative, anti-family messages.
Here's Bebo Norman for Compassion International.
Compassion's commitment to integrity is incredibly important to me, only because I, like many other people, can tend to be very skeptical of what relief organizations or what they're about or where the money goes and all of those things. And I just have seen firsthand what happens with the money that people give to Compassion and the time that people give to Compassion and the integrity that Compassion uses in that process. It is what makes Compassion effective, ultimately. And it's effective in terms of handling people's money. It's effective in terms of handling these children and their relationships and their life and their emotions and their education and all of those things. But ultimately, the reason that it impresses me the most is because it is effective in having integrity is what makes things that are spiritual effective, ultimately. There's no pretense. It is what it is. And that, to me, it makes offering the message of who Jesus is legitimate.
Make a difference today. Call Compassion now, 877-496-7016. That's 877-496-7016.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show. We hope you are enjoying this week's show. After a short break to hear from our sponsor, Ohio Christian University, we will rejoin our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's guest.
Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell are coming to Ohio Christian University Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Get your tickets today at ohiochristian.edu for this riveting event featuring Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell. Tickets are going quickly, so secure yours now at ohiochristian.edu to meet Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell at Ohio Christian University on Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Made possible by Millwood Inc., the Computer Workshop, and Christian Healthcare Ministries.
Ohio Christian University is one of the fastest growing universities in the nation, offering undergraduate and graduate degree programs fully online in the areas of business, psychology, chemical dependency counseling, nursing, and ministry. You can earn an accredited, relevant, and affordable online degree, all from the comfort of your home. Now is the time to prepare for your future and earn your degree with Ohio Christian University. Call today at 855-OCU-GRAD or online at ocuonline.com.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show, where faith and liberty meet. Now, back to the discussion with our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's wonderful guest.
A lot of the parents battle their children over how much time they listen to this. They have their headphones on, they're on their phones or the internet, everything else. You state the battle, though, is not with our children, but it's really with adults with the wrong worldview and do not care about our children's future. Why do you say this?
Exactly. Listen, it is. A lot of times people in our generation blame the young people for their behavior and things they're doing. Well, it's adults who are creating the pornographic websites targeted to our children. It's adults that are creating the MTV programming. Adults are creating the violent video games. It's adults that are targeting our children. The children aren't creating this garbage. Adults are creating the garbage. And it's adults that have a different worldview than the vast majority of moms and dads. And those people are after making a bunch of money, and they're after promoting a lifestyle that they believe in. And when parents have that wake-up moment and they sit down with their children and they explain how their children are being manipulated, I find that many teenagers start getting it. And they start understanding, wait a second, this is not my mom against me. It's, gosh, who are these other people that are trying to manipulate me to make money? I have a chapter in my book that really goes to kind of the core of this, called Understand How Marketers Target Your Children.
Right.
And I find that that's really important for parents to understand when they get to the point where they need to, set some boundaries and guidelines, not just for content that their kids view and consume, but for the amount of time they spend on it. That's the real tool in helping them sit down to explain to their children why it's necessary to set some boundaries.
Well, you might find it interesting, as the Dean of the School of Business and Government here at Ohio Christian University, we have all sorts of controls on our internet and we restrict certain websites and various other things. And one of the IT guys was telling me the other day, we have so many great Christian kids here, but we have some that, are not totally bought into the whole thing. And he said they are absolutely creative about getting into these bad sites and, disseminating some of this stuff. And I blame the adults for that. But before we get into some more of that, talk about the music videos on MTV. I was shocked at some of the numbers you quote in your book.
Well, I mean, MTV, again, we're kind of clueless oftentimes in our generation. We think it's just music videos. It's not just music videos. It's programming that is created, again, to manipulate our children. There was a powerful documentary that was done by PBS, which really exposed the creators of MTV and the marketers behind them of how they have gone in and actually done psychological studies. They have people called culture spies where they actually go out and they see what influences teenagers and how to manipulate them, and then they create programming around that.
Well, we'll put a link up to that PBS documentary. But one of the things I think they discovered that was almost 70% of all music videos are highly sexual, and 80% of those that are sexually oriented link violence to sex.
Yep, they're always pushing the envelope, and here's why. Because they are experts in child and teenage and pre-teenage psychology, they understand that children they're really a walking, bunch of raging hormones, right? When they're going through those adolescent years.
Oh, yeah, I'm here at college. I know what you mean.
You are an expert in it too, right?
Yeah.
And because their hormones are raging and because they're changing from children into adults, they have all this energy, and they have a lot of sexual energy, and they have a lot of raging hormones and emotional energy. And the people who mean harm to our children and are after their money are taking advantage of manipulating those hormonal cravings. And they understand children kind of get a high, so to speak, emotional high when they see sexual material, which causes them to want more.
That's not just children either.
Right, children, well, not just children, but they're especially vulnerable when you're going from children into adulthood. And so what they do is they create programming that creates that psychological emotional high. So keep a kid sitting in his bedroom watching television and gets an emotional high, he's going to keep watching that stuff, and he's going to want more of that stuff. And what they're doing is manipulating our children. Our society used to come together, and we had things called cotillion, and we had parents and churches and schools partnering to take those crude times among young men, for instance, and to channel them into becoming and teaching them how to become gentlemen.
Yeah,
and
imagine
taking
that.
their energy and putting it. Imagine that, right?
Right.
Well, now you have the media that works counter to that, and you have the school systems, by and large, who instead of channeling that into worthy endeavors are actually standing in front of teenagers in school and showing them how to use condoms.
Rebecca St. James for Compassion.
I think one of the big issues that I see in my own life, and I just see in young people, is this common selfishness. It's a complete battle to not live for self, because everything is saying, Rebecca, if it makes you feel good, do that. Please yourself. The culture is encouraging that in such a huge way. And I think compassion is an amazing way that we can be encouraged to live beyond ourselves. It's not about us, It's not about how we feel. It's more about serving Him and showing His love to a hurting world. And through compassion, you really actually get to see the need. Here is a huge need, and I can make a difference one child at a time.
To sponsor a child or to learn more, call Compassion now, toll free 877-496-7016. That's 877-496-7016.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show. We hope you are enjoying this week's show. After a short break to hear from our sponsor, Ohio Christian University, we will rejoin our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's guest.
Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell are coming to Ohio Christian University Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Get your tickets today at ohiochristian.edu for this riveting event featuring Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell. Tickets are going quickly, so secure yours now at ohiochristian.edu to meet Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell at Ohio Christian University on Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Made possible by Millwood Inc., the Computer Workshop, and Christian Healthcare Ministries.
Ohio Christian University is one of the fastest growing universities in the nation, offering undergraduate and graduate degree programs fully online in the areas of business, psychology, chemical dependency counseling, nursing, and ministry. You can earn an accredited, relevant, and affordable online degree, all from the comfort of your home. Now is the time to prepare for your future and earn your degree with Ohio Christian University. Call today at 855-OCU-GRAD or online at ocuonline.com.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show, where faith and liberty meet. Now, back to the discussion with our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's wonderful guest.
Just a second, Rebecca. There are two young children that just walked by my studio, and I'm going to call them in, all right?
Great.
And I'm going to have you put the headphones on this young man. How old are you again? He's 11, all right? I'm going to put the headphones on him. And your first name is? Monty. Oh, that's right. Your dad's name, Monty. Monty is the head of our government program here, and this is his son. And he doesn't have a mic, but what would you like to say to a young man like him at this age?
I would like to say to him, can you tell me his name again? Because I didn't quite hear that.
Monty.
Monty?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, M-O-N-T-Y.
Hi, Monty. My name is Mrs. Hagelin, Monty. It's nice to meet you.
He says hi. He can only hear you on headphones.
Right. You know what I would say to Monty, because I don't know him or anything about him, I would just say to him at 11 years old, the world is at your feet, and you can spend your time right now learning the best and most beautiful things about life and about truth, and striving to be a leader among your generation by looking to set the highest standards of honesty and integrity and goodness. Or you can kind of follow the crowd and watch what they're watching and do what they're doing and kind of end up probably no different with a firm foundation.
Monty, what do you think of that? You like it? Does that make sense to you at 11 years old? Are you hearing that from your mom and dad? I know you are. Well, Monty, thank you. And his sister's here. And how old are you? She's 9. Why don't you put the headphones on your sister and let Miss Hagelin talk to her for just a second. Now, this is a beautiful young girl, also the sister of Monty. What would you say to her, Rebecca, at her age?
Okay. What's her name?
What's your name again, hon? Maci.
Maci. Maci, you are a beautiful young woman created by God and are like a shining diamond in his eyes. And whatever you do in your life, strive to be that polished, shining diamond for God that shares joy with other people every day. And the way you can do that is by making sure your relationship with God and with your parents is always in line, and that you're spending a lot of time in His Word. And that is what will cause you to grow up and always be known by your friends as somebody they can trust in and rely on. And there's nothing more important than that, than having that wonderful, good reputation.
Does that make sense to you, Maci? You hearing that same message for your mom and dad? That is wonderful. Thank you for joining us, Maci. Okay, they're gone.
That was fun.
Yeah, her dad brought them by to see the studio. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to hear you talk to children, because one of the things that I would say to parents is you give so many great suggestions about how to have conversations with your children. And I think that's a skill that a lot of parents have lost. They're talking to them about all sorts of stuff, but not the things like you just mentioned of these two. So I appreciate you doing that. But now, back to something else that I found I quickly got my wife when I read this, and I said, this is so true. And that's your analysis of how video games are so much worse than TVs and movies. Would you explain that to our listeners, please?
Yeah, it's really important for parents to know that. And first, let me say, all video games aren't bad. Video games in and of themselves aren't bad. They can be a great form of entertainment. But here's what you have to really kind of think about as a parent. When a child plays a video game, they're not just watching characters do things. They become a character. You put that controller in your hand, you pick the identity of the person in the video game that you want to become, and you tell that person what to do. But your choices in the behavior of the character you are dictated by the storyline of the game. So, for instance, in some video games, your child, becomes the guy that steals the car, rapes the woman, beats up the policeman, stabs somebody, shoots people. Your child actually enters into that and makes the decision and does those things in a virtual world.
I know some parents, and the son is just turned 13, and he wanted Grand Theft Auto, the brand new edition that was out. And the mother said, absolutely not. And the father says, oh, it doesn't hurt anything. And he bought it for him. What would you say to that father?
I would say that's tragic. It's very tragic to say as a dad, it's okay with me if you want to pretend for a while that you're a rapist and a murderer. That's fine. I have no problem with that. That's what you do when you give your kids Grand Theft Auto. The other thing that parents don't realize is a lot of this technology in the shooting games was developed by the military and is used as training in the military and special forces on overcoming the necessary emotional things you have to overcome in order to kill somebody in combat situations. Mm-hmm. And they're taking that same technology and putting it in entertainment for our children.
Well, not to get off the subject, but I've heard that some of the of our military that have gone over there that have been big video game users throughout their life, when they finally did have to do some of the things that they do in those games in war, like Call of Duty, that when it occurred, they kind of first saw it as a video game, but then when they actually did have to shoot and kill someone, it was absolutely traumatic because they weren't prepared for it. But
right, exactly. But why would a father who loves his son hand over to a 9-year-old or a 13-year-old something that's going to cause the son to pretend like he's a rapist or murderer? Mm-hmm. Why would you do that? Mm-hmm. Because of peer pressure? Because you're afraid to tell your son and sit him down on the couch beside you and have a man-to-man conversation, which, by the way, our sons are screaming and crying for. In studies of both young girls and young boys, the number one desire that they have when asked if they could have anything in the world is more time with my mom and dad.
Yeah.
And we are, as parents, we are voluntarily giving away our influence over our children when we're too scared or too nervous or too busy or too distracted to sit down and talk to them in a loving way about the big questions of life and explain to them what we believe. We are voluntarily giving away the influence that they are craving. They're craving it. Mm-hmm. Because when a father sits his child down on the couch and lovingly talks to him, it says to his son, you are the most important thing to me in my life. You and your sister and your mom, you guys are it.
And you take
You're
a bullet
focus.
for them,
Yes, and they don't know that. If you're just going, you know what, honey, the Grand Theft Auto, that's no problem. I'm having some fun. Here, honey, go buy the game. The kid is excited temporarily, but deep down inside, when he puts his head on his pillow at night, he wonders why my mom thought it was bad. I just played that game, and I kind of understand my mom, but gosh, Dad didn't think it was bad. I wonder why Dad doesn't care that I do that stuff.
Well, this battle for our kids that you refer continually through the book, and I agree 100%, it is a battle. Would you share the pediatrician story with your daughter that I think shows kind of the things that parents might be facing and they don't even realize it?
Yes. And this is several years ago, so I know it's gotten worse since then. But when our daughter was going to play sports, in school, we had to take her for the customary physical. And so we were there just to get a physical to say that she was healthy enough to run track and in high school. And the pediatrician started asking her all kinds of personal questions.
Didn't she tell you to leave the room now?
Well, first she said, yes. First she said, Kristen, I'm going to ask you some questions now, and this is a good time for your mom to step out of the room. And I said, what? I know, I'm here. She goes, well, I'm going to be asking Kristen some really personal questions, so it's a good time for you to leave because these are personal and private questions. Okay, so that was the second thing she said to me. For a second time, she tried to get me to leave the room. Now, I know at that point a lot of parents leave, okay, because they've asked around. And they think, oh, doctor-patient, privacy. And so because it's an expert telling them that, they get up and they leave the room. But I said, wait a minute, she's a minor, and I'm her mother, and I will be here for this conversation. So the pediatrician was stunned. And she looked at me, and then she looked at Kristen, and she said, okay, well, all right, then. She kind of gathered herself. I'll ask you the questions I was going to ask you. First, she said, sounded innocent enough, Kristen, do you smoke? Kristen said, no. Does anybody in your household smoke? Kristen said, no. And she said, that's good. And she said, Kristen, do you drink alcohol? Kristen said, no. She goes, well, that's good, because all those things are illegal, so, you wouldn't be doing them anyway, probably, so that's a good thing. But, Kristen, some of your friends are going to be having different kinds of relationship with boys now. She started getting into sexual questions. And she said, some of them are going to be doing different things. But the bottom line is, Kristen, you have to decide what is right for you. And I intercepted that conversation. I said, Kristen knows that sex is for marriage, and she understands that. And then the doctor stopped and looked at me and then turned back to Kristen and said, well, that's what some people believe, but you have to decide what's right for you. Okay, think of those conversations going on with young girls all across the country without their moms and dads around. A 2-minute conversation with the professional and the child can destroy what moms and dads are trying to teach their children in one fell swoop unless you're on top of it. This is what we're fighting. It's not just the schools, it's not just the media, but it's at the doctor's office. It's in the shopping mall. It's virtually everywhere you go. And in the car on the way home that day, I turned it into a teaching moment for our daughter, and I said, Kristen, and I was clearly upset.
Sure.
She was like, Mom, calm down, calm down.
Yeah, right.
And I said, but do you understand the center of what was happening there? She was trying to put a wedge between you and me. If you get pregnant, is that doctor going to be there for you at night and in the morning? Is she going to be there for you when bad things happen to you, when your heart is broken? If you get a sexually transmitted disease, is she going to be there for you? Who's going to be? Your dad and I are the ones who are here watching your back and love you. It's not some professional. For her to dare say she can talk to you and interfere with our relationships is nothing but lies from the pits of hell.
Well, that brings me.
Did that, and she got it.
That brings me, Rebecca, to education. One of the quotes I pulled out of your book, you said many educators believe that they actually know what is best for your son or daughter. You also say that many parents have given up being the primary director of their children's education. What's misguided about this?
Well, what's misguided is God didn't give children to just a group of unnamed, faceless educators. He gave vulnerable children to a mom and to a dad to be the ones who understand their personalities, to study them and recognize the beautiful gifts and talents and traits and sensitivities those children have so that you can steer those talents in good directions and make best use of helping them develop their talents and their skills, and taking the beautiful personalities, whatever their personalities are, and building upon their strengths and helping them get over their weaknesses and traits.
But don't you say that as a corollary between the story you just told about the pediatrician and what these education experts might be doing when you're not around?
Of course. Educators and masses education, okay? Education for the masses is a cookie-cutter approach to how somebody who defines the standards and the curriculum thinks children should develop, and that they should all be the same and believe the same things and be taught the same way and sit at the desk for a certain number of hours and play a certain number of minutes per day, et cetera, because they're educating for the masses. God created each one of us as individuals with different needs and talents and energy levels and strengths and creativity, and that's why we live in families, so that those skills can be developed and values can be passed on in a way that children can understand them. One of the things I used to do was teach communications classes on how Jesus communicated in the Bible. And one of the central lessons is everybody that came up to Jesus as an individual, Jesus dealt with them according to where they were in their walk in life, with their honest questions or maybe with their devious personalities or whatever it was. Jesus dealt with them. He took his truths and he applied them according to their lives and where they were and met their needs according to where they were in life. And that's why parents are to be a reflection of Christ, and that's why we are supposed to be dealing with our children on an individual basis and not just handing them over to mass education every day.
Well, I know some parents have to send their children to public schools because they have a need or whatever, but when we moved from Houston to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, actually Westmont, Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh, my wife and I met with the school superintendent, and he began to realize that we wanted to be involved in our children's education. And he turned to me and said, Dave, I want it to be very clear. When your children get on the bus, they belong to us. When they get off the bus, again, then they belong back to you. And you need to be sure that you understand that's the way education is supposed to work. And
hey, listen, exactly. I am not against the public school system, so to speak,
right,
although it has a lot of problems. We practiced in our family what I call parent-directed education. And that is my husband and I, at whatever stage in our children's lives, wherever we lived and whatever their needs were, we made the decision we're either going to homeschool this year, or maybe we send them to a private Christian school, or maybe the local public school is the best alternative. The point is, we made those decisions. And if they went to even private Christian school or public school, we knew what were in their textbooks. We communicated on a regular basis with their teachers. We went down to the school office when we disagreed with something. You do not give up your parental rights when you send your children to a public school. That is a big, fat lie, okay? It's anti-constitutional. You do not give up your parental rights.
It's anti-everything. And as a lawyer, I can tell you, you do not give up your rights.
That's exactly right. And so it's up to parents, though. You know how, remember earlier in our interview, I said we voluntarily give up our influence every day?
Right.
Parents voluntarily give up their influence. If you approach public school, or I'm putting my child on the bus, and they're going to come home 8 hours later, and it's up to the school teachers to teach them, and all I'm going to do is make sure that they get their homework done and show up for PTA meetings, well, then you have given up your influence in your child for the most significant part of their growing years. But if you put them on the bus and say, I'm teaching my children I'm sending my children off to school, I'm going to understand what they're learning every day. If I see good, I'm going to reinforce it. I'm going to make sure they're good students and they study hard. But if I disagree, I'm going to let my voice known and I'm going to protect my child. Then you're using public education for your good and for your child's good. And there's huge difference there.
Well, that brings me, Rebecca, to something that, I thought was absolutely wonderful. I grabbed my wife, who's grandmother of 17 grandchildren, and I said, something that I see so often, I still see it even here at the university level. You have a chapter that's called You Be the Parent, Not Your Child's Best Friend. Because I see a little bit of analogy with the stuff that you're talking about. You want to talk about the concerns in that area? Because I think it's prevalent across this country.
Yes, it is prevalent. We're kind of in a stage where, for whatever reason, and this is especially a problem with moms, they want to be their daughter's buddy. They want to be their daughter's girlfriend. And yes, it's great to be a friend for your daughter, but you have to be a mother friend for your daughter, not just another friend, okay? A mother friend, not just another friend. Your daughter is surrounded by peers who can be her friend. She doesn't need another drifting peer. She needs a mother to guide her and mentor her and teach her how to be a lady and to sort through the negative messages and to find courage and strength and her inner beauty. She needs a mentor. Your son doesn't need another buddy to sit around and play Grand Theft Auto with him. He needs a dad that will show him how to be a courageous and loving and caring and selfless man. That's our role as parents. It's not to be our kids' buddy, but to be their mom and dad. They can have innumerable friends, but they have one mom and one dad. And if you mess it up, there's nobody else there that's going to guide and take that role for them. You'll have a lot of negative influences that are throwing them around between each other as they're growing older, whether it's media or educators, that are all too happy to try and take your place. But you know your children, and God gave you the role. So I say to parents, reclaim the influence that God has given you over your children and that your children are craving and begging for you to take. Take that role.
Michael W. Smith for Compassion.
I cannot begin to tell you how crazy I am about compassion. I don't get involved in too many things, but I'll never forget 13 years ago I got asked to be involved with Compassion. And if I'm not mistaken, I think my answer was no, because I didn't know anything about them. But I said, I'll tell you what I'd love to do. I would love to sponsor a child, and then I would like to go see what you do. I'll never forget my first trip to Ecuador. It was just life-changing. I don't know if you've ever been to a third world country, but at some point, if you ever have a chance to go, it will change your life. But I went and saw Compassion's work and what they did nutritionally for the kids and then educationally. And then the most important thing was that they shared the gospel with these kids. And I'm convinced that there's hundreds of thousands of kids who have come to know Christ in a personal way through Compassion sponsorship program.
To sponsor a child or to learn more, call Compassion now, toll free 877-496-7016. That's 877-496-7016.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show. We hope you are enjoying this week's show. After a short break to hear from our sponsor, Ohio Christian University, we will rejoin our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's guest.
Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell are coming to Ohio Christian University Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Get your tickets today at ohiochristian.edu for this riveting event featuring Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell. Tickets are going quickly, so secure yours now at ohiochristian.edu to meet Dr. Ben Carson and Dr. John Maxwell at Ohio Christian University on Monday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Made possible by Millwood Inc., the Computer Workshop, and Christian Healthcare Ministries.
Ohio Christian University is one of the fastest growing universities in the nation, offering undergraduate and graduate degree programs fully online in the areas of business, psychology, chemical dependency counseling, nursing, and ministry. You can earn an accredited, relevant, and affordable online degree, all from the comfort of your home. Now is the time to prepare for your future and earn your degree with Ohio Christian University. Call today at 855-OCU-GRAD or online at ocuonline.com.
You are listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show, where faith and liberty meet. Now, back to the discussion with our host, Dave Garrison, and this week's wonderful guest.
There is one question that I questioned a little bit, and I again talked to my wife because I was so excited reading your book, as you can probably tell. And,
thank you.
And because maybe it lines up with the way I think about life and my worldview and all that good stuff. But, I think being my age and having this many kids and grandchildren, maybe parents ought to be listening to grandparents for a change. But here's the thing that jumped out of the book. You state in your book that children want boundaries. When I observe my grandchildren, I'm not sure they want boundaries. And I know what you mean, but I'd like you to explain it to the listeners so that it's a little clearer, because I think the culture's gotten this a little bit messed up.
Yeah. Children are looking for a firm foundation. They want to know what's true and what's not true. They want to not understand the difference between good and bad. See, God has created a hole in all of our hearts for Him and for truth. And we have a natural searching that goes on looking for that. But unless parents understand that, and they just hand their children over to anything, or they give into their children's whims, or they just they're just silent and they're too busy, then children will not understand what the truth is of life, what the firm foundations are that they can always count on. They're looking for something solid upon which they can count on in life, and the world doesn't give them that. And so when parents set those truths and parameters, but explain why, our children will get it, and they will appreciate it. And if you don't do it, they're going to be just flying in the wind from one day to the next and making lots of mistakes they will regret for the rest of their lives.
Oh, I agree so much with that. And I'd like to probably close with this one question. And it's something that I kept thinking about for, the last couple of months. And then I heard this report. But here's the question I kept asking myself. What should childhood really be like? And how should parents think of their children? And I ask this because I heard about a fad recently among Hollywood parents to treat their children like adults. No sippy cups, no pacifiers, only talk to them as you would to an adult and treat them like adults. What do you think of that cuckoo thing?
Well, you just said it. It's cuckoo. You know what? And again, it's a lie from the pits of hell. The Bible's very clear about training our children in the way they should go. Yeah. The Bible is very, very clear about, all of us approaching our relationship with God like children approach us, and not as just, with utmost faith and looking up to us. I mean, if anything, the Bible teaches the opposite of that. Instead of children being like adults, the Bible tries to teach adults to have more faith like little children. And so, once again, it's, as it talks about in Romans, it's trading the truth of God for a lie and making right wrong and wrong right.
But don't you think it's dangerous that we're kind of almost taking away the childhood away from children?
Of course it's dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous, and it's a lie from the pits of hell to call a child wise, to act like they need, they have to have more responsibility than their little minds and hearts are able to take at any one time. One of the problems that we face as a society today, because this has been going on for quite some time actually, is you have young men in their 20s who know all about sex, right?
Well, they know it when they're 12, I think.
Right, but in their 20s, they've experienced it, and they know all about that, but yet they don't know how to hold down a job. They don't know how to have a relationship with somebody with the opposite gender that's going to last for a lifetime. They're moving back in home with their parents because they don't have the maturity level or the emotional maturity. They have all this, quote, experience, but nobody built their emotional maturity and truth and principles into their lives. And so they're floundering as adults. And it comes from this very mindset that you're talking about, that Hollywood is always promoting, which kind of brings us full circle to where we started on this interview, right? The media's influence on our children. And it can't be understated. Am I against television? No. Am I against great movies? No. Am I against technology? No. My goodness, technology is the reason that you and I are able to share on the radio today with other parents. These are all tools, and we have to realize we can harness these tools for the good of our children and our families, or we can give them over to the enemy, so to speak, and they will use them to do our children harm. And the choice is ours.
Well, listeners, I hope you've enjoyed today's show. Please go and take a look at Rebecca's website. And what is the title? I've gotten to it a couple of different ways. What is the best way for people to get to your website?
Sure. The most direct place to go, and it's really just a landing site to get information on the book or to sign up for my free newsletter every week that comes to your email inbox absolutely free. It's called howtosaveyourfamily.com. Very simple, howtosaveyourfamily.com.
Well, that's wonderful. Rebecca, the other thing that we didn't really cover today, but I want to be sure the listeners know, that a lot of the things we said, we were kind of covering the 20,000-foot look at it, but you have very, very specific tactics and suggestions about how to deal say with the teenager that's trying to set the mood of the house, and different ways to talk to your sons and daughters about purity. And it is really a great book. And listeners, if you can't figure out today how excited I am about it, I've missed the calling here. Rebecca, thank you so much. And we hope to get you both here at the university, because your philosophies would fit right in here. And also, we just thank you for what God is doing in your life.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to other parents. I really, really appreciate it. And thanks for all the great work you do. And, I want to invite your listeners, when they go to the website, they can email me from there as well if they have a particular question. And I'm not a counselor or an advisor, but I do. I spend a lot of time coming up with the most commonly asked questions that parents have in raising teenagers, and try to find a resource of answers and solutions that have worked by other parents and for other parents based on biblical solutions. So,
well, again, thank you so much.
All right, thank you. God bless you for your work.
On behalf of our host, Dave Garrison, I'd like to thank you for listening to the Faith and Liberty Talk Show today. For additional information about the show, please go to faithandliberty.org, where you can access previous shows, like us on our Faith and Liberty Facebook page, and access other resources. Please keep in mind that the Faith and Liberty Talk Show exists only with the generosity and support of our listeners. If the show is of value to you, we would appreciate you visiting our website, faithandliberty.org, and donating to the show. The opinions and comments represent the views of our speakers and may or may not represent the views of Ohio Christian University. May God bless you, and thank you for listening to our show.